Happy holidays. It's now the 25th of December on this side of the dateline. I don't really do the Christmas thing anymore. I haven't done in quite some time now. Many years, in fact. The only exception being that I will, of course, buy gifts for someone that I'm in a romantic relationship with, and that is about affection, of course, and an opportunity to show it, not about the seasonal celebration or its associated traditions itself, really. It's about respecting their love for the traditions around Christmas. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not all bah humbug about it. I don't begrudge or disparage anyone else from embracing it, however fully or slightly, or celebrating it in any way they like. And I don't thrash against the commercialization of it or some such, although some of that is pretty gross, of course. And it's not even the aggressively cynical way the Christian church just absorbed, co-opted, or flat out stole basically everything about the seasonal celebration they call Christmas from other religions, pagans and seculars even, like the parasitical organization that they are, which of course is why I find it so funny that conservative Christians get so worked up when you say Happy Holidays instead of Merry Christmas. Motherfuckers, you stole someone else's holy day first. Shut the fuck up about yours not being respected the right way. You goofy bastards. And I mean, in fact, there is some stuff I like about Christmas, in principle at least. No, instead not doing Christmas, and when I say that I mean I don't engage with it at all. I don't put up decorations or a tree, I don't do the broad gifting thing, except for the exception I mentioned before. I don't really do anything at all Christmassy related. No, instead not doing Christmas is a choice I made in my late 20s, I guess. I never really enjoyed Christmas as a kid. I was raised in a Catholic family, so that means a large family. And that's what I hated about Christmas. It was the large family gathering. Every year, the whole family would all gather in one place, a rotating roster of the larger houses of my aunties on my mother's side. It was only ever at our place once, but we were kind of lower middle class, so the house was quite small and it was very difficult that year. But every single year, half a dozen families, 3 generations deep, in one house, festooned with bright, shiny, blinking decorations, endless loops of bad music, unstoppable chatter of gossiping, the drone of food preparation and consumption noises, crying babies, screeching children. It was hopelessly loud, mind-shearingly busy, and almost every sense was assaulted all at once. And through this din of noise, I could hardly even focus on anything my relatives tried to converse with me about. In the assault of smell from the food and the smokers and the perfumed baths my aunties took, there was no direction to look that wasn't filled with the noise of movement, of people, of blinking lights, of fluttering tinsel, constantly being brushed past and bumped into, and trying to find somewhere to sit or even stand that I wasn't always being bumped into accidentally or being grabbed at by an adult or a child or just being pressed against by someone squeezed into the seat too tightly next to me. The only sense that was safe was taste. The food was good. It was always good. This particular seasonal celebration, despite the traditionally winter thematics, happens in the depth of summer for Australians, of course, what with the world being round and hurtling around on a tilted axis, meaning we have hemispherical opposing seasons. And this means for many Australians, a Christmas dinner is a cold-cut meat affair with lots of salads and whatnot. It's very different from what you would see as a traditional Christmas meal in an American sitcom or something, I suppose. Almost exclusively any hot food on offer was, of course, the traditional Australian barbie. Snacks and steaks and hamburgers and such. Plenty of cold beer for the blokes and sparkling wine for the women. Because something else my family did very well was sticking very tightly to expected gender roles. But there was one thing, and one thing only, that I looked forward to every single year. Many of my aunties were very good cooks. My mother and one of her other siblings were not amongst those counted as good cooks. But that other sibling excelled at one dish: trifle. Every year, without fail, she made a massive, beautiful trifle. And the trifle was her thing. No one else was allowed to bring a trifle. This was the one thing she did well when it came to cooking, and damn it, she was going to own it. She was proud of this trifle. She worked hard on this trifle. It was exquisitely assembled every single year. And every single year I ate light of the main course so that I could properly enjoy this wonderful treat. It was the one time in that whole day that I felt relaxed. The taste and the texture of that trifle were encompassing for me. For some reason, while savouring this sweet, soft dessert, I could focus. This trifle was the only thing on my mind as I consumed it slowly. It was meditation in food form. And to this day, it is the one and only thing I miss about those Christmas gatherings. And I'm not being hyperbolic here. When I think of those Christmas gatherings, that trifle is the only happy thing I think about. But even that was eventually taken from me. At some point throughout the years, one of my aunties noticed this behavior in me, how I'd get my serving every single year, never any other option on the dessert table, no matter how exquisite, how rich, how fancy, and how every year I'd savor it in silence, tucked away in the quietest spot I could manage, and how it would consume my entire attention, and how happy I looked while I was doing so. My auntie made a very careful point of describing this behavior to me, this pattern to me, and how it was sad that I couldn't be that happy looking the rest of the day for my family. How it was disappointing I didn't try harder to be part of everything. How sullen I was in conversation, how I didn't relish the chance to play with my cousins, many of whom I only saw once a year and knew nothing about and had nothing in common with, and the age gap between us was significant. I also saw her bring this topic of discussion up with my mother and 3 of my other aunts in one of their little gossip circles. This, of course, demolished my one small, joyful salvation for the day. From that year onwards, I was, of course, self-conscious about it. This gossip spread throughout the family. My relatives from then on would bring it up when talking to me at every year, making a point of it, making fun of me for it, making what they thought were jokes about the only real reason I even come to these things at all. I mean, in a way, they were right. Because until I was old enough, until I was living independently and had agency enough to say no to attending these events at all, this is the one thing that I held on to in my mind as something joyful I got to do on that day, something I could look forward to actually enjoying. It was the one small hope and anticipation of joy that enabled me to endure the rest of the day. But every year from that moment on, when I looked at that big, fancy glass bowl being placed on the table, I'd feel the eyes draw towards me and the voices call out to me, "Oh, there it is, watch how fast he grabs the plate." And so it became very clear to me that this thing that made me happy, this one thing that made me happy for the entire day, was a thing I was being judged for enjoying. It was something I was doing wrong in the eyes of everybody else in that room. It felt so petty. I had this one thing I enjoyed about this goddamn gathering, and it was taken from me, made to feel like it was an insult to other people. I wasn't allowed to enjoy my one thing unmolested by the judgment of others. There's a strong case for making this Pavlova story a metaphor for any number of things a family might judge a child for. A child who stands out, a difference, a lack of compliance with the expected order of things, a divergence. But this is a true story, not a metaphor. What I didn't know at the time was the reason I had such horribly anxious times at these family gatherings, why it stressed me out so much, why I despised them, why I felt sick in my belly on the car ride to them, just in the anticipation of the day ahead. Why this thing that everyone in my family, that every bit of media, that every TV show, every Christmas special, every movie told me was supposed to be a glorious, wonderful, happy event for everybody. Why did this thing fill me with such misery, such gut-wrenching anxiety? I mean, I always knew I was the black sheep of the family. Nobody in my family made a secret about that. I always stood out from these people. I never fit in with any of them. I always had to pretend, act a special way just to get through a conversation with any of them without making them seem uncomfortable or confused. I had so little in common with any of them, it was bewildering to me. How could I be related to these people, raised by these people? The way they just talk, just prattling on about the most vapid, stupid, unimportant, gossipy garbage, and act like it was a significant thing to do. It was important to do that, to talk about this garbage. The patterns of their interactions, like little clockworks, the blokes telling the same fucking jokes about barbecuing and beer every goddamn year, the way they'd infantilize my grandfather because of his illness, the way I'd see him nearly imperceptibly bristle at every single time one of his own children talked down to him as if he was a helpless child. Why and how did no one ever notice this stuff? Why was everyone just playing along as if this was normal? Is there a script to this? Is this a ritual? Why did nobody bother teaching me how to do this properly if I'm doing it wrong? Well, to them it was normal, of course. Typical might be a better word. And little Nate, he was divergent, and unless I tried very, very hard to act out the expected motions and responses, they would notice my divergence and act concerned. And so I let them jabber at me about what I wanted to be when I grew up, what school was like, because to them, these tedious, nearly scripted conversations was how things should go. This was normal to them, just going through these motions. Every single year, the same questions about how you're enjoying school and do you have a girlfriend and blah, 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 blah. I just wanted to be left alone to think about the chemical reaction that the snapper in a Christmas cracker goes through. Why does it make that noise? Was it similar to a match head? And why do match heads not make that cracking sound? What was it about this particular chemical reaction between these two sliding bits of paper that made them crack so loud? Why was it considered safe? Obviously it's an explosive of some kind. Surely if you got enough of them together you could do something dangerous. How many Christmas crackers do you need to actually do damage to, say, a house brick? It would be many, many more years and long after I stopped going to these events at all that I'd finally start to understand and have context for why I loathed and felt so uncomfortable at these gatherings. And it wasn't just because I felt nothing in common with all but 2 members of my entire family, or just because I found most of them tedious, nosy, obnoxious, and boring. And the word that made it all make sense was autism. I wasn't just a black sheep. I was very literally divergent from these typicals. I was functionally different in a very basic way. My experience of the world was, very literally, on a physical level, different to how they experienced the world. The jostling, the crowding, the unstoppable din of noise, the assault of smells, the endless attempts at pointless small talk, being forced to be in a house where I had no space of my own, no escape, no refuge, being surrounded with blinking lights and glittering decorations, constantly prompted to politely engage with people I didn't even really like as people at all because we shared genetic markers, while being forced to heavily modify my own behaviors for the comfort of others. In other words, to mask. For an autistic kid, this is a fucking nightmare. For an undiagnosed autistic kid with no support, no frame of reference, no explanation, no context whatsoever for how they felt and why they felt that way, for the what and the why of how they feel this way, it is a searing hell of absolute misery. So no, I don't hate Christmas just because I don't engage with Christmas anymore. But I do hate how I was forced to celebrate it. I hated that when I grew up, autism was underdiagnosed, that nobody noticed or cared enough to investigate why I was so different in so many different ways in my experience. I mean, part of that is my own fault because I got quite good at masking quite early, so I didn't let anyone see how different I was. I get that, I understand that. But I like to think about a world in, which I grew up where, say today, for example, if I was an 8-year-old today with the internet the way it is, with the access to information the way it is, with issues around neurodivergence and mental health issues being more openly discussed than ever before, I'd like to think that maybe I could have had a different childhood that wasn't so miserable in so many different ways. Which is why every now and again I want to share stories like this because it's important context for those people who feel like I do, or people who have people like me in their families. But I don't hate Christmas, even though I have nearly nothing but bad memories about it, and even the one good, glorious, tasty, delicious, smooth memory that I had was tainted and stained by being shamed and mocked for it every single year afterwards, for enjoying the wrong thing about Christmas, for being happy in the wrong way. But even though I don't and choose not to engage with Christmas or the holiday season in general to any large extent, I truly, deeply do hope that any of you who do honestly, really, truly enjoy this holiday season have a wonderful one. And to my fellow neurodivergents, you are not alone. And to the young neurodivergents out there, oh man, I really hope that there's enough understanding out there these days, enough language out there these days, so you can hopefully properly explain how you're feeling, and what you need to feel comfortable and happy on this gathering day. Whether it be just to be left alone with your Pavlova, or whether it be a nice quiet space in the back of the house where you're allowed to go sit for a while without anyone coming to bother you. Whether you can go on a little walk for a while without anyone asking you why you need this space for yourself. So thanks for listening, and happy holidays.